All right. Hey, folks, we are back at NG Atlanta. Just real quick before we get going with Mike, just want to thank Progress for sending us out here and having us do these interviews with the speakers. Mike, you did a presentation about the CLI.
Yeah, I've given quite a few talks about the CLI, but I wanted to do a little bit more and give people a little bit of a feel for what's coming, not just what's there. I think a lot of people have an understanding of what the CLI does, but I touch on that a little bit, but more so give a feel of new features that are coming, a little bit of timeline, nothing specific because, times change. But the idea of what kind of things can you expect and why you should be using the CLI.
Makes sense. Now, you're one of the maintainers of the CLI, correct?
Correct. I've been working on it for about a little over 2 years.
Mm-hmm. Now, do you work for Google or?
No, I started just on my own time. And my wife wasn't too thrilled about that because I'd come home from work, spend some time with the family, and then I'd jump back on my laptop and work on open source. And I started contracting through Wrangle as a contractor. And then about a year ago, so March of 2017, I started doing that full time.
Awesome. So CLI is something that I think a lot of people are pretty familiar with if they've done anything with Angular 2, 4, or 5.
I think so. I've watched the numbers on NPM about the number of downloads, and it blows me away that to have the reach and the usage that it's getting. Downloads in the last month were the highest they've ever been, and it was 1.9 million downloads.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, I was shocked and floored by that. I mean, it had been a few months around like 1.4, 1.5, and to see 1.9 really just takes it to a whole new level.
That's awesome. So what did you show off in your talk?
I did, like I said, I did a recap of what was there because there's some features that some people may not have known were there, like the XI18N to be able to do language extraction for translations.
Oh, okay.
And there's a little feature that it's minor, but NgDoc to be able to run NgDoc and then a search query to automatically open up the Angular.io docs.
Oh, really?
As a query to be able to do your research. So rather than having to stop what you're doing in the command line, how does this work? So the example I used was change detection. What are the settings for change detection? How does that work? To be able to just say ngdoc directly from your terminal, which you are there all the time, doing builds and what have you. To be able to just say ngdoc, what did I say? Change detection. And it'll open up the Angular.io website to be able to search that out and find more information. To kind of, rather than having to go to your browser, search for Angular.io and cuts out a few steps. So just the convenience factor.
That's amazing. I love it. It's like, oh, okay, I don't even have to think about it. I don't have to switch gears. It's just going to pop it up for me.
Absolutely.
Cool. What's coming down the pipe for the CLI?
So I broke it down into 3 different areas. Current, which was just a review, what's there. And then I did a near future. And by near future, the 2 things that I showed are currently in beta. The 1.7 beta is out with both features. The first of which is something called budgets or bundle budgets, however you want to express it, that'll allow you to essentially keep an eye on how your application is growing over time, because most people are just focused on adding new features and adding things within there, but it's kind of in the back of their mind, and you don't always remember to say, hey, how big are my bundles are getting for deploying and for the user experience of, we added a lot of features here, and that's actually now up to whatever, 2 megs. To be able to set some thresholds to get warnings or errors based off of different settings within your configuration file. So that you could potentially, by setting it up as an error, it will actually exit out of the build process with a failure code.
Oh, wow.
So that your CI process won't complete and therefore won't be able to merge because of a bundle size exception.
That's really interesting. I mean, a lot of times we're working on our very powerful laptops and, and then we kind of load it from our local host. So there's no latency, there's no nothing, right? So, you get a 6 meg JavaScript payload and it just goes, okay, right?
Yeah, you're not too worried about it because it's all right there and it just loads roughly instantly because there's no network trip or anything.
Right. But then, you get on your phone, you're on a 3G network because you're in the middle of nowhere. And all of a sudden it's like, holy cow, what's going on, right?
Absolutely. Because you run dev builds, and you got dev builds you've got files that are like, I don't know, multiple megs.
Yep.
But the other thing with the budget feature is that it will only run against production code. Because if you set a threshold, it's like, I don't want anything bigger than 5K as a made up threshold, then it will fail if anything gets over 5K. On dev, everything's going to be, well, not everything, but many things are going to be well over that.
Right.
So only if you're minifying and running through the full set of optimizations.
Yeah. Well, and sometimes we load in libraries that load in dev tools in the dev environment. It doesn't load that in when we do prod. So yeah.
Absolutely, and you don't want to necessarily worry about that with your builds. So yeah.
Cool. So we have bundle budgets. What's the other feature?
It's the bare bones. Well, not bare bones. It's the intro to something that's going to be extremely powerful and extremely helpful, in my opinion. It's a new command coming to the CLI. It's called NgATL. Not to be confused with NgUpgrade, and I've been drilling this. I've been drilling this into my head so hard that NgUpgrade, as you know, this is previous feature, is going from AngularJS to Angular.
Right.
NgUpdate is a command within the CLI that will currently go in and look at your package.json and say, hey, your Angular version is behind, so we're just going to take that and we're going to bump it up to the current version.
Okay.
We're going to make a call out to NPM and say, hey, what's your version? Or what's the latest version of Angular? Oh, okay, it's this. We're just going to update that in the package.json for you. Same thing with the CLI, RxJS, TypeScript, and zones. So it'll go through an update so that your application is then up to date.
Gotcha.
And that's already there in the, like I said, the 1.7 beta currently.
What if they're breaking changes like from 4 to 5?
So that's the next step is to the way that TypeScript gets compiled is through something called an AST, an abstract syntax tree.
Yep.
And what we're able to do is utilize that to inspect inside your application to say, hey, this pattern that you're using here is no longer supported. That change has been broken from one version to the next, and make those changes for you as well. It's not there yet. We haven't gotten there yet. But that will be functionality that will be added in the future to be able to kind of kick the NgUpdate feature set up a whole lot. The example that I like to use, and I used it during my talk, is that when you went from Angular 2 to 4, the only breaking change was that the template tag that we were using is now, or went from template to ngTemplate. And we'd be able to inspect that and say, hey, you have a component, here's the HTML. I'm going to look for that pattern to see if you're using the template tag and automatically change it to ngTemplate.
I gotcha. That makes sense. Now, one thing that I wonder about with CLI and some of the other announcements that Brad made earlier in the week, what about Bazel?
Bazel's still being worked on internally. It's not quite ready yet, but it's going to be an option. So the other, it's not so much Bazel specific, but we're refactoring the build process right now.
Right.
To have almost an abstraction layer, so that if you decide that you would like to use Webpack as your build engine, there would be an implementation of the build process in Webpack, as well as potentially Bazel. And if somebody wants to write something in Brocchi or System or anything else, Gulp, Grunt, whatever, whatever technology you want to use, to be able to implement multiple types of build processes so that you can choose whatever works best for you.
Gotcha. I have a running gag that I'm going to make Chuck.js, which does everything.
Hey, so I was really disappointed to find out there was already a Broccoli.js for the build engine.
Yep.
I was like, people know me as Broccoli, so
there you
I was
go.
hoping to personalize something, but yeah.
Yeah.
I'm out of luck.
I guess you'll have to keep working on these CLI.
I'm not upset working on that. There's, like I said, there's other things that are coming down the road that are not just in the beta as well.
Yeah.
Bazel being one of them.
Yeah, we'll specialize it and call it the Brock CLI.
I don't. I get a lot of credit for the Angular CLI. I did a few talks about it, and people associate me with it. But I work with a great team of other guys that we do good work as a team, and we get along really well and enjoy the product that we work on.
I was going to say anything that's reasonably complex usually has a team behind it, not a single person. So yeah, it's.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah. It's great to work with other people because to be able to bounce ideas off of people. I've always said that no one knows everything, but collaboratively you can get to the best solution possible.
Yep, makes sense. So short term we have the budgets and we have the feature we were just talking about that my mind blanked on.
Update?
Yeah, the update. Yeah. Sorry.
That's okay.
So what's coming long term?
Long term, I created an issue last week about another new command. And it may not be this process that it goes through, but conceptually the idea of setting up third-party libraries, and a side note, building libraries for Angular is also on the roadmap. That'll come with a new build system that maybe not immediately with it, but partially or not too long afterwards with a new build system. But this is more so adding third-party libraries into an application.
Okay.
The example that I have in the issue that I created is, hey, I have an Angular application. I just did ng-new, but I want to set up Angular material. And so conceptually, the idea is run NgAD add Angular /material, which would then run through some processes to say, hey, I'm going to add that dependency to the project. If it's not already there, I'm also going to automatically import whatever needs to be there, set up the bootstrap process to have material there, maybe bring in Hammer.js and the other pieces, icons, and also import maybe some default pieces.
I've been through all that on my own. That would be really nice.
Yeah, and it wouldn't be exclusive to just Angular packages.
Right.
So Angular Fire is another one. So, all right, well, we need to get the configuration for Firebase. So automatically set up in the environments file, places to put all that environment information. And this way, the people who write libraries, not only do they understand how they work, but they also have a feel for how to best utilize it, how to get started and set up that configuration. And that's great through docs, but it's a pain to go through and say, hey, step 1, install this. Step 2, do this. Step 3, do that. It'd be great to have tooling to do that. So that's what the goal would be with NgAD.
Well, and they're paying me to think about more complex problems than what is the API key that I put into this spot in my config file.
Sometimes. I mean, API keys are very important. So
it's true. You can't do anything without them, but yeah, I mean.
But deciding where to put it in the application is something that the people who write the tooling and the different libraries have
they've already
explored
thought about
through
it.
all those different ideas.
Yep, absolutely. Yeah, that'd be really nice. Anything else major coming down the pipe?
Some conversations have started. So we have the CLI is a great tool in that you can start from nothing, create a new project, build it, test it, debug it locally, run through all of those things, and building it to get ready for deployment. But to close that full loop, we're also talking about how we can help and assist with getting it off of your machine and deploying it.
Right.
So exploring ideas around a potential command like ngDeploy.
Oh, nice.
To be able to say, hey, I have it here and I want to be able to push it to Google Cloud. I want to push it to Firebase, Roku, Azure, wherever. To be able to have some sort of predefined things within there that other people could implement. So maybe an interface or some set of rules you have to follow to say, hey, I can be a deployment target to deploy applications.
That would be nice.
I think it kind of would put a nice little bow on everything to say, hey, I've closed the loop from inception, work, completion. Not that any software is ever complete.
That's true, but the things that we used to talk about being hard are generally now solved by a lot of these frameworks. And so the things that I see people really struggling with at this point are, how do I build it? How do I deploy it? How do I make it interface with the other systems that I needed to talk to, or the big ones? And so if you can hit those and make those easy, then we can go back to, okay, how do I get this feature done?
Absolutely. And I think that we were in a mode with the CLI development of, hey, let's get something that works. Let's get it out there and help a lot of people along. And now it's thinking of, hey, people are using it, it's got adoption, and it's working.
Right.
There's bugs. There's always going to be bugs. But it's working and people are using it. So how can we make those, the other ancillary things easier?
Right.
The user experience of it. And with things like ngUpdate, ngAdd, to be able to say, hey, there's breaking changes, but you know what? It's okay. We got your back.
Yep.
Those breaking changes will automatically be updated for you.
Right.
ngAdd of, hey, I want to configure this, but that's kind of a pain. So how can we take advantage of that and be able to update applications or add new features into your application? And then, like I said, closing the loop of being able to deploy would be, I can't say it would be feature complete, but it would be a lot closer to a more complete tool.
Right. Very cool. Well, if people want to follow the progress on some of these features, they just go to GitHub.
Yeah, when new issues come up and their features, if you're interested in new ideas, new features of what may be coming, there's a tag. I think it has feature in it, so you can search for the tag. I think it's type:\feature is the exact string. But search for something with that label, and you can keep an idea of what new features may or may not be coming. Participate in the conversation. Hey, this would be useful. This would not be useful. Have you considered this aspect?
Yep.
Feedback is great. Release notes are part of the repo as well, so if you're curious what's there, release notes for betas are also published, so you can see what new features are coming, even if they're not in final release versions.
Cool. And if people want to follow you on Twitter or something like that?
I have a nickname that I picked up late in high school or early in college, Brocco, Brocco. Same username on Twitter and GitHub.
Awesome. All right. Well, thank you for coming and just talking through this with us. I also encourage people to go watch the talk. I mean, we're just sitting here talking to each other, but there are, I saw you prepping, and, you actually show people how all this stuff works. And so
I try to. The first talk I gave about the CLI, I was just going to do slides, and I did a walkthrough with a team member, and they were like, no. You can't just show slides. Show how it works. That's the beauty of it. Show that it works and that the usefulness of it, so that actually people can see and relate to it.
Yep.
So I like to try and demo when I talk about the CLI.
Awesome. All right. Well, go watch the talk. Thanks to Progress for sponsoring. And we got more interviews coming from NG Atlanta.